the stream, you can skip ahead an entire 47 seconds and you'll get to the start, because we are very much on time here. Daniela's in the house, making sure that we're doing it on schedule. Yes, will do. All right.
Steve's doing a little technical thing that I reminded him to do. So in the meantime, if people want to add their location to their name, that's always nice. Some of you I've seen a lot. Hello, Annika. Hello, Rebecca. Hello, Kashanka. I've forgotten your name. You said it already. Kashanika. You told me it's one of those Triratna names that I always get wrong.
Antika.
Thank you. It took me like 3 years to learn Vidyadasa's name.
And now you just call him V.
Just call him V.
My college roommate was from southern part of the States. His name was Randolph Hoylman. Took me a year to learn to say Ran Holman.
Ran. I think we're ready to start.
Yeah, I'll get things started, do the little intro-y type stuff. So let's do this. So welcome back everyone for this session. So in case you've sort of got a bit confused and don't know where you are, this session's on making trauma healing playful, and we're here with Mark and Paul. So Mark will probably say, don't say this, but just to give you a little background, he's worked in 5 war zones with street kids, with Russian LGBTQ plus community. He's worked with police and aid workers, 3 militaries. He's been sober for 14 years. He was traumatized as fuck, but now he does okay. And swearing warning as well. And we've also got Paul, who's Mark's mentor.
Not too late. People have got kids with them, Steve.
Yeah, whoops. And we've got Paul. He's a trauma educator, so he's been practicing teaching Aikido for over half a century. He has a 6th degree black belt in Aikido. He's got another black belt in karate. He has a BA in philosophy. He's got a PhD in physical education, Dr. Paul Linden, and is an instructor of the Feldenkrais method of somatic education. He's going to tell some good jokes and some bad jokes and some dad jokes, and maybe they're all the same thing. So a little bit of background before this session starts. Obviously, this is the last day of the live sessions, but you can still share the links. The replays will be available until September the 22nd. So I'll drop the links there in the chat in a moment. And we've also, I'll tell you a little bit more at the end about the courses we're offering. So there's the Ilan's course, which is about healing. That's getting to like functional okay in your life. So that's like getting in relationships and being able to work and that sort of stuff, shaking to heal. We've made it super accessible. It's less than $50 because we want as many people to benefit. And then we also have the superpower courses, just going from good to great, either in your own personal life or if you're a facilitator, helping others to do the same. So we'll tell you a bit about those at the end. And just before we start, some safety things which are necessary for this session. So just check in if you've watched all the sessions today, if you've been binge watching, maybe catch this on the replay, check if you're actually resourced enough for this right now. So is watching kind to you? And bear in mind, this is also education, it's not therapy. So no judgment at all, but if one-to-one therapy would be more suitable for you if you're going through something quite difficult at the moment rather than this. If something difficult does come up, either in this session or afterwards, we recommend moving and breathing, taking a nice walk in nature, hanging out with good people, eating some good food or maybe some bad food occasionally, but just getting some rest. So taking care of yourself, and yeah, that goes for if you get agitated or space out or tense up during this session as well. And finally, just bear in mind that this session is not for the faint-hearted, not for those who are easily offended. So we approach the most serious subjects with a sense of humour, as you might tell from the title of this session. So if you're not up for that, then if you're not up for laughing at yourself, laughing at others in this healing context, then we recommend not sticking around just for this, but maybe catching it later, or if you're in a better place. Having said all that, I think I'm going to hand over to Mark and Paul to get this started.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we're definitely going to be laughing at ourselves and traumatized people. So just be ready for that. And I kind of feel like humor particularly comes in at a certain stage in the healing journey. And sometimes we need to take things seriously. And particularly, it can be empowering. And I'm going to sort of ask Paul, Paul works with people who have really had some of the worst things happen to them. Like some of the worst things you can imagine. Yeah. I tend to work with people that have just had trauma from life. Like sometimes it's called small t trauma. Sometimes it's just, I still think of it as trauma. I don't even want to say low level because it's very subjective, but it's certainly different populations generally, except for some of the stuff I do in Moscow here. generally these days with like executives and coaches and yoga teachers. And it's interestingly similar patterns, just from less extreme experiences. And in all these situations, humor can be really helpful. And it's important to get, depending on where you're coming from culturally, that laughing at trauma is not laughing at people's pain. The whole point is to empower them. So, Paul, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yes. What is power? Power is the ability to stay present and to control what happens around you and in you. So I have Parkinson's. I used to start off workshops by saying, I'm here to shake things up. Now I start off workshops by saying, I used to start off workshops by saying that I'm here to shake things up. But that's too corny, so I don't say that anymore. In fact, I didn't just now. So power to me is the ability to control things. And if you're afraid, angry, spaced out, you can't control things well. When you're having fun, you control things better. So what's an example? One of the worst ones I can imagine, but I'll imagine worse later. Somebody in one of my sessions with him remembered being raped as a kid and part of a gang ritual. So he came out of that recall. I said, quick, how many ritual abuse perpetrators does it take to screw a light bulb? He said, what? I said, 13, 1 to screw it and 12 to chant. He broke out laughing and laughing and laughing. It was victim's humor. He made fun, not of the pain, but of the power of the perpetrator. And one of the effects of humor is to bring yourself back.
Yeah, I mean, humor is that present moment thing. And I sometimes say this: towards humor and away humor. So towards and away from what? Connection with self and other, right? So there's humor, which we know is like that joke, which is pushing intimacy away. And there's the humor which enables someone to go to something painful. And as Paul said there, by laughing at people that have disempowered you, it's a way of taking the power back. And right. I think it's no surprise, like I come from an Irish background, Paul from a Jewish background. It's no surprise that both of those populations tell a lot of jokes and there's a lot of humor, despite having pretty horrific ethnic histories, right, Paul?
Well, one of the jokes usually is all the Jewish holidays have the same format. They tried to kill us. We're still here. Let's eat. See why that's funny? It isn't, but it is. So
yeah, someone in the chat just said they're not ready for this, so they're going to leave. And I really support that, actually. If kind of like hearing jokes about some of these things is like too much, I get it, right? Like there's a time when that's not appropriate. And obviously when Paul's or I are working one-to-one, it's about feeling it with the individual.
Yes, exactly.
There's a moment, right? And it's either a moment to get into the depths or to get out of the depths. And that's what I call towards humor, when you're going towards connection or towards a process of healing. And you can kind of feel it with a client, right, Paul? Like
yes,
there's a
exactly.
moment where you go, that joke would not have been funny half an hour ago. Now they're going to smile and love it.
Right. One of the other jokes I've told recently is not nearly that bad. What is, if somebody were going to invent an anti-gravity machine, what kind of a person would do that? A mass murderer. Get it?
That's bad one.
That's why I tell them, because the bad jokes change the person's relation to the language. I had another client that I taught to make pancakes. Why? This is one of the examples I often use. He went from somebody who felt himself battered as a child to learning how to make pancakes with batter. It changed the language and his relation in his body to the word batter.
If you're a second language speaker, some of Paul's jokes rely on the double meanings of words in English, which again empowers people, but they might not make sense if your first language is French or Ukrainian or whatever it is. Just be aware of that. It's a kind of English language double entendre. Is that how I say it, Ava? Not very good at French pronunciation. So yeah, if you don't get the jokes, that's normally why. The other reason is sometimes they're not funny.
Of course not. They're not funny. One of the best jokes I never told. Well, here's one. You remember Clint Eastwood, Make My Day? It's a cultural image of power and manliness. May not be quite on target. One of the lines he never said is, okay, Staubsauger, make my day. Those of you who speak German, Does that make any sense?
Don't know that one.
A Staubsauger is vacuum cleaner. What it is literally is dust sucker. Okay, dust sucker, make my day.
German, beautiful. We're not doing your Holocaust jokes until we stop the recording afterwards, okay?
Of course, I understand.
No, Paul, I will mute you. It's going to be very optional. I don't want you destroying my entire company.
Well,
so the Germans here, they will get very upset.
I haven't told any yet, and I promise I won't until maybe later.
Okay, we'll give people an opt-out for that. So, so part of the fun for me is a little bit of transgression. And I think there are good reasons for that in healing. Like when you've been traumatized, you're now weird forever. Okay, you're not broken forever because your weirdness can become a superpower. But you ain't part of like quite the normal people. And while we're all traumatized to different degrees, and I think owning that weirdness is part of the empowerment. Yeah, owning the weirdness of, you know what. And that can be, for example, I'm ADHD and Paul's autistic spectrum. Paul, tell us a joke about autism.
I can't remember one.
Paul, what is it you always say, that Asperger's people would never invade the world because...
I had an Aspie kid for a client. He was really down on himself. And at one point I said to him, look, let's face it, you're the next step in human evolution. He said, what? Why? I said, can you imagine getting 100,000 people like you, pointing in the same direction, telling them to go there and kill people? They would never do that. And so equally, you have to look on the positive side.
Equally, I don't speak too fast because of my ADHD. You guys just think too slow, okay? So part of the humor is a reframing and empowerment. To say, you know what? I might be weird, but I'm not broken. I've got superpowers that some of you guys haven't got. So I think this is deeply healing. The other thing is humor requires a taking out from the thing. Yeah, humor is a sign of intelligence because it requires abstraction. If you're caught mentally and emotionally in whatever it is, you cannot tell a joke. You have to step out to see the double entendre. You have to step out to make humor is normally about a new connection. It's
yes.
Like two parts of the brain are simultaneously lit up and then you go blah, and it sort of frees you up. But to do that, you have to be out of the thing. It's like when people start to get burnout, a sign is that things stop being funny. Like this is like when Danielle and I were working on the conference or whatever, when we lost our sense of humor, that was always a bad sign, right? Because we were in fight or flight. If you're in that deep fight or flight response, which remember that's what trauma is, okay, the fight, flight, freeze, being more stuck in the body, you can't be making jokes that are real jokes because that requires sort of ventral vagal creativity. Yeah. So some sympathetic arousal plus ventral equals play. Yeah. But if you're just in either the dorsal vagal or the sympathetic arousal, you can't make jokes. There's no creativity there. There's no ability to make new links. You're stuck to the old links.
Yeah? What am I doing here? I'm flowing, generating power from flow. I'm not doing particularly strong, powerful movements. But if I am stuck in a feeling of powerlessness, incapability, unable to move, I can't do it. I can't flow. So in a sense, this is kind of a joke. I'm playing with the concept of power. I had a client recently who, when she was little, had been hit often by her father. So I always teach people the appropriate level at the appropriate time, self-defense. When she went into the memory, she always regressed to the feeling of being a small girl. So I said, look at your father and say that. She looked at me and I can't do that. I said, yes, you can, because on this hand, you've got this. Keep it behind you, flip him the bird, come in and strike him. She thought that was hilarious. And then she said, she came up with a good phrase. Dad, you can't do that to me again. If you try, I'll break your arm, and I know how. And that struck her as very funny, and it was in a way. It's playing with the concept of powerlessness. Another way to do this, I am powerless. Yes, I am. if you can play with the concept, it loses its power.
Should we all give that one a go just to keep this interactive? Does everyone want to say, I am powerless?
And play with the powerlessness.
Yeah.
How does that feel? What does it do in your body? What do you do in your body?
I think people are going to put some stuff in the chat. Here's another way to play with your trauma, which remember isn't always appropriate depending on the type of where you are in the journey and how you are and how you're supported. What I do with clients sometimes is exaggerate their pattern. You know?
Yes.
So by taking a pattern and making it worse, you make it caricature, you make it comical. Like, I'm the poor hippie who has no money, but it's really spiritual, I promise you. Or Daniela, what would be your control freak one? If I can jump in with a bit of improv.
This is not fucking funny, Mark. You need to be really serious.
Even more, ramp it up. Turn up the German.
That's not really funny, Mark. You need to be serious here. Don't waste.
Even more. This can be more German.
This is not funny, Mark. You need to be serious.
It's not funny at all, is it? It's definitely not funny. We must take therapy very seriously.
Wasting money here.
Wait,
Okay.
let me solve the problem. I was teaching a course in Germany one time, and I said, Verwirrend ist ein großer chinesischer Philosoph. That does not translate. The English joke is confusion is a great Chinese philosopher. Verwirrend is the literal translation, but it means zip. There's no joke in it. And I really enjoyed the look of puzzlement on their faces. That brought them out of what they were thinking and feeling.
Being unclear to Germans is one of my favorite games, actually. That is one of my favorite games. So by exaggerating a pattern, you see it as a pattern and not as you.
Right? It is you, but it's a behavior you're doing. You can choose otherwise once you exaggerate it because you're showing you have control over it.
Right. If you can turn it up, you can turn it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's another good joke. Okay. One of the things I often do is have people tell me what I should not do. Why? If they're sucker enough to do it, to tell me, what am I going to do next? I'm going to have fun with it. If pain and suffering aren't fun, why bother?
Someone said we should make the title of this whole week "Making Trauma Fun," and I was like, no, we can't do that just because even California is still asleep. Luckily, right now, I very deliberately asked Steve to schedule this before 5 p.m. UK time. This is when they wake up. I know when they wake up, I have an alarm that goes off, boop, 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 like red alert, California and Portland are in the house. They're going to start taking everything really seriously. But, we thought we can't really call it making trauma fun because people will think we mean the traumatizing event is in some way fun, which it's not. And by definition, it isn't, right? But by making the healing process fun, particularly that latter part of the journey, the superpowers part, as I call it, it's not about being cruel. It's the opposite. It's letting people go to places they couldn't otherwise go to.
Which is precisely the reason I act like an idiot sometimes. And I tell clients, well, I can't do that. I say, yes, you can. If I can act like an idiot, you can act halfway rational. It's opening up the possibility of not doing what you're supposed to do in the way you're supposed to do it.
So by you being subversive and weird and unpredictable, you've seen me do this 100 times, right? People that have been with me, like just doing something unexpected, flipping modes. What do you mean, Mark, flipping modes? Like having a conversation with yourself. Oh, that's an unusual thing to do, right? That you, by doing that, you give them the possibility of subverting their own patterns, right? It's like, if I can be weird, then if I can be really weird, then to them, a bit weird is actually going against their normal trauma pattern or doing something different than their normal trauma pattern. It loosens the whole thing.
One of the things I often use is humor as a punishment. So if somebody stops breathing because they're afraid of something, I say, well, there was a study in a New York hospital about breathing, and they discovered that when you stop breathing, you die. After the 10th time they've heard that joke, I'll say, if you don't start breathing, I'll tell the joke again. And they start breathing just to keep the jokes away. So it's, again, a different way of reframing.
There's something else in here about humor is the joke needs there needs to be that loving intention with it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of a given for Paul, but it's, I had this wonderful moment with Paul, actually. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. So back in the day when I wasn't filthy rich, Paul stayed at my house, and it was a small house. And he got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, and he kind of tripped over me because he had my bed and I was like sleeping on the floor outside. So it's kind of, I was like, because it's a small apartment. And he was like, oh, and he didn't know where he was because he was a little old man in the middle of the night on his Parkinson drugs, which is some good shit, I think. And he was like, oh, where am I? Who am I? But in that moment, he was still just really loving as he was stumbling to the toilet in the middle of the night, not knowing who he was or where he was. And I thought, okay, this is my teacher. Yeah, this is the guy I want as my main mentor. Because of that experience, not because of the techniques. And I think without that substrate or underlying kind of real goodwill, the humor can be quite dangerous.
Yes, I agree. For the longest time, I thought the techniques were what I had invented. And now I've realized that what I had invented were techniques that open up my heart. And that's what allows people to trust me, because they can tell when I'm grabbing them and punching them and doing all kinds of things to help them overcome what they didn't know before. They know I'm in there rooting for them. I want them to win. One time I had a woman, and with one hand I was holding her hand like daddy and a child. With the other hand, I was attacking her. So in one body, she was in two modes. And the humor is a way of saying, come on, let's do it. Let's play. So what patterns do you have, any of you, that you'd like to play with? Can you find something that's too sacred to play with? Ha, ha, ha.
The sort of taking of trauma very seriously and making it the sort of the victim sacred is a kind of modern tendency, and it's really destructive to people's healing, really destructive.
Well, no, it is not if you want to earn money, lots of money to help people heal for a long time. And that's not destructive. Yes, it is. Maybe it isn't.
Someone said pity. Someone said being scared of being laughed at. Anger. Anger's hilarious. You seen angry people? So I'm very important.
Well, one of the things that I've done to play with that, Mark, stand up, please.
Oh, it's coming.
Okay. Now, I can't reach you exactly, but samurai patty cake, remember that one?
Yeah, hang on, I've got to put selfie back on. Ready?
Okay, turn. Well, this way will do.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Shout. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Sex.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Brutality. Hurtfulness. Yes. Are you breathing?
Yeah.
You sure?
Well,
I'll tell the joke again if you don't start breathing.
Okay.
Yes. One time I was doing this with a guy who had MS and I had Parkinson's. He was shouting MS. I was shouting Parkinson's. It's fun. If you can't have fun with the pain, why have it? Probably the only good joke I've ever told. Actually, I told one other good one.
Hang on, Paul. I just want to give people a go at this. So if you want to try this yourself, find a word that's something, don't go for the most hardcore thing right away, but something that's difficult or that you have some fear or anger around, and see if you can do it in that way with the yes and the breathing. And if you can turn your camera off if you don't want to be seen doing this, and we can't hear you. So if you want to try this can be like Paul Linden's Parkinson's yes. Right? Because being scared of the Parkinson's isn't going to help.
Yes, Parkinson's.
Yeah. So what's your version? If you want to give it a go, I think it can be, what do you call this, Paul? Frying the word?
Yes, frying the word. So what's a good word to fry? Why did they hurt you? Think of that. Because they were what, six? Or find an S word. Shitty, supervising, whatever. What did I just do? I just took something and took it a little past the reasonable instruction into an example of strange thinking.
But by keeping it weird, it keeps the whole thing loose.
Yes. There's a time for weirdness and there's a time for non-weirdness, but I don't think there's a good time to be tight.
So Paul and I can both give very clear what's called operational instructions. That's not the time to be weird. It's like, do this this is where we get German. Okay, do this very specific thing that's very clearly defined.
You call it German, I just call it clear thinking.
Well, it's probably best you don't call it German, given where you're from. But it's that. So by keeping
Who's telling jokes now? Who's telling Holocaust jokes now?
No, we're not. We're still live. We're not doing that until we've stopped the recording.
Okay, well,
you're gonna get my whole company closed down. Bloody hell!
If you can't do it, then I certainly can't.
Listen, Paul, we can't make those jokes because you guys are in charge of the world. We know that.
Yes, of
so
course.
There's one right there.
I know. I know.
So the keeping it loose, trying to talk about humor is the least funny thing, right? It's like as soon as you start talking about it, it's like, oh, it's boring. But by keeping it the whole thing weird, it keeps the people's behavioral patterns loose. And normal trauma response behavioral patterns are like ingrained, right? So it shakes the whole thing up by people going, this is unexpected, this isn't meant to happen. Does that make sense? So those behavioral patterns are a lot more easily shifted. Method to the madness, and it's more fun. Some of the time, honestly, I'm just self-amusing as a teacher.
Of course. Well, oh yeah, I was going to tell you the good joke. Life is a good news, bad news joke. The good news is that through pain and suffering, we gain wisdom. The bad news is that there's more good news coming. I've never told that to a survivor who hasn't cracked up laughing, because it's not at all funny. It's too true to be funny, or it's too funny to be true, or something of the sort. One time I was called to a therapist's office, and she wanted me to help these two people dialogue. And the man and the woman were just stuck. So I looked at them, I put on my best goofy look, wandered around the office, collecting stuff and depositing it in their laps. And after a few minutes of this, they looked at the therapist, and I could tell they were thinking, we are paying money for this jerk? And then at a certain point, I stopped and I said, imagine a red number 3 added to a yellow number 4 and get an orange number 7. And the woman did one kind of thing in her body, and the man did something totally different. By getting them into that place of what is he doing? Why are we doing this? I brought them present so that when I gave them the task, a mental task, we could find very deliberately how they were doing it differently in their bodies. I said, you guys can't communicate because you do this with your communication. So the humor is how I brought it to their awareness that something was screwy.
Okay, we are moving towards wrap up, the official wrap up anyway.
That's true.
If people have any takeaways, please put them in the chat. This is a time to get clear, actually. So is there anything that you're taking away from this that's like new? We're actually breaking quite a taboo here in a way. And like the jokes aside around it, it's quite dangerous in the modern context. Less for him because he's an adorable little old man. But for the company to host something like this is potentially risky because people these days quite like to take things out of context and use it to damage people, unfortunately. So I think the reason I hosted this one, though, is I thought it was worthwhile because I feel like humor, the sort of American therapeutic tradition, isn't that full of humor, let's be honest. Right? And I think that's actually a real loss. Yeah. And people coming from Irish and Jewish backgrounds really fucking notice. I'm like, why are these people taking it so seriously? It's only torture.
Serious shit, man.
So, like, it doesn't help. So I think it's actually a real gift that Paul and other people are, you know, just starting to kind of talk about this stuff. And it is about where someone's at in the journey. So please don't take away the message of laughing at people's pain. Please don't take away the message of, you know, you could always make jokes about awful things. Part of it is that coming from love and feeling when's appropriate. But at the right time with the right person, it's a wonderful tool. Wonderful tool. Yeah, some great highlights here. Keep it weird.
Well, the only other good joke I've told, my son one day when he was younger walked up to me and said, "Dad, what is a record?" I said, "It's just like a CD, but groovier."
How many Germans does it take to change a light bulb?
Well,
One.
how many martial arts does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh, you ruined my fucking punchline, Paul. It's all about the timing. We can't have two of us here.
It's two different. Well, you tell your punchline, then I'll tell mine.
Tell the punchlines of my joke. Does that work? All right, let's leave it there. If you are interested in getting some trauma healing, you can look up Alan stuff. We have a very cheap thing that people can get. And Paul, of course, has got lots of good stuff online, resources as well that, you know, we're not selling, that are just Paul stuff if you want to look them up. Well worth it as well. The superpower stuff, someone was asking me, it's stories from like Paul's deeply personal story, mine, Patricia's, Jane's, Mel's, different people, because we find with the sort of later stages and the growth stages rather than healing, everyone's journey is quite unique. So drawing out what's worked for different people from different stories is probably the best you can do, as opposed to here's the technique for it. Yeah. So it's a kind of narrative way of learning. But in there's a whole bunch of stuff as well. You know, you'll see that I think the Q&A groups are really good. So this, for me, is, and my group's almost full up now, actually. Paul's group's still got plenty of room because he's not as popular as me. So those groups are really helpful because you can actually talk about your own superpowers. Like Daniela and I have opposite superpowers from some of the same trauma. Like we're both in Afghanistan. Erica and I grew up in the same place in England, opposite patterns. She does courses for women who are too nice. I do courses for men who are too nasty. So, you know, this is where the individual Q&A sessions is quite useful, because you need to ask questions about your particular thing, because we're all fucked up, but in different ways. Yeah.
The punchline to my joke is, what was the joke again? Oh, yes, the martial artist. It only takes one martial artist, but the martial artist must really intend to change the light bulb. That's a different punchline, isn't it?
Different again. Okay, let's thank Paul. Thank you, Mr. Shaky. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Mark, for being my friend and colleague and good guy for so many years.
I would say it was a pleasure most of the time.